right, great to be here, everyone. My name is Jonathan Claudius, co-founder and CEO of Asymmetric Research. I'm here today because we work with some of the highest stakes projects in crypto. We help these projects grow and ship under immense pressure. And in doing so, we need and are required to build holistic security programs for these projects in order for them to scale and scale safely. One thing I want to ask of you today as part of this conversation is I want to ask you to do something a little atypical. I want to ask you to be boring. And I know that I can feel like a very atypical ask here at a conference called Accelerate. Obviously, projects, at least in the course of my work, a lot of the projects that survive, the projects that really go the distance, they do exactly that. They choose boring. And in finance, operations, and security, this is where long-term value gets preserved. And this is not through a lack of ambition. What it really is it's a resistance to chaos. It's an aversion to variance. And what it helps us do is make fewer irrecoverable bets. And in a space like this today, especially crypto, this is it's very rare. We're asked to be fast, we're asked to be aggressive, we're asked to move or die. And the uncomfortable truth is that at some point, you will ship and you will also die. You will burn through your treasury trying to manage bug bounties at a rate that you wouldn't have expected. You will open the door to a $200 million exploit, and you will irreparably break the trust that you so hardly worked. And what I'm here today is to help you ship and not die. And in building these programs, we're not here to slow you down. We're here to offer guardrails. We want to help you build resilient, composable, and yes, a little boring when it really matters. But boring in the way that seatbelts are boring, and boring in the way that safeguards on roller coasters are boring. Roller coasters are a ton of fun. I'm sure many of you enjoy this. But riding a roller coaster stops becoming fun when someone falls out of the roller coaster or everyone falls out of the roller coaster. So what I would ask you all as you're working on projects that will redefine the future of finance, I want to ask you to be boring, and I want you to use that as your competitive edge so that you don't die. So the agenda today will be relatively short. I don't have a ton of time. We'll be talking about some enduring principles that stood the test of time. Over the past 20 years, there's a lot of things that have stayed the same that are still very true today. We'll talk a little bit about why the market's trending right. What this means is people choosing to put security too late in the process. We'll talk about some of the quiet patterns that are holding us back or holding some projects back. And then we'll try to figure out if it's even possible to shift left and also ship fast. And I'll actually go through a couple examples of projects that did exactly that, and they're using that to accelerate some of their progress. So enduring principles. These are incredibly boring terms, and I encourage you to take them all in. The first is defense in depth, and this is the one that we're going to focus on a lot because it's got the most opportunity for improvement in Web3 programs today. Defense in depth is adding layers to programs, or adding layers to your security program that are imperfect, and layering them in such a way that they form a unified defense on your security program. We also have a separation of duties, which is making sure that we don't give anyone in the system too much privilege. We don't want someone to be able to propose and also approve a critical action. And then on least privilege, we want to make sure that we're basically making someone's role, their access level, assigned to their role. As we build security programs from initial inception all the way to launch and then off into mainnet operation, it can often feel like this. In the beginning, when you're first writing code, you're first sitting down to do something, it can feel insignificant to be thinking about security at this stage. And as we get later and later in the process and we build additional layers from design to internal audit to external audit and running bug bounty programs, it can often feel that the ROI is much greater later in the process. It's a great feeling of validation to know that a leading security firm has put the stamp of approval on your thing. But really, this is how it feels, and this is how it actually is. Security is a bit of a slippery slope, right? If we ignore it too late and we wait too late in the process, we end up too steep on the edge of this curve. And this is when we start having very, very low ROI at the late stages if we didn't incorporate it early enough. And ultimately, what we want to be able to do is we want to incorporate a lot of these security gains in the design process such that we don't have to pay as many debts down the line. And like I said, the market is trending right, and if you can see from this slide, it can really feel like being on a hamster wheel. We're thrashing, we're making lots of effort, we're ship or die mentality, but we're really not going anywhere. We're not making any meaningful gains on the security program. There's lots of pressure to launch. We have a lot of teams out there that are incentivized heavily to get to mainnet as soon as possible. There's a lot of competition in there, and it can feel like if we don't ship, then we're going to die or we're going to miss this opportunity. There's a significant amount of talent scarcity in this space, meaning that there's just not enough people that fully understand these complex systems as they evolve quickly. And it oftentimes feels like we postpone security into the late stage of the process. So we think of it as like a gateway or a checkbox. And unfortunately, for a lot of these teams, what they do is they accrue a series of debts as they ignore or they don't put complete layers of security into their program. And this can be something that becomes very, very hard to get away from. You can end up really on the far side of the curve here, and it can feel like you just can't seem to make progress because you're constantly fixing bugs and you're constantly getting hurt. So I want to talk a little bit about security smells. Some of you may have heard of code smells. Security smells are kind of the same thing. They're things they're anti-patterns that we see in the work that we're doing, but if we do too many of them, they can compound risk and make it aggressively harder to make forward progress against your security program. So we'll talk about a couple of those examples. The first smell is security as performance. So what this is basically performance art. This is making a security program that looks good, but maybe not necessarily be good. It's about getting partnership announcements. It's really this look at me mentality to basically, it's basically getting folks to look at us and thinking that we have a great security program, but we haven't actually put in the work. So we can oftentimes end with this false sense of confidence, and we don't actually get any foundational coverage. So if you see something like a bug bounty announcement or a contest, these can be good, like essential parts of the program, but they can't be the only part of one's program. This second smell is misaligned investment. So these are folks that are shipping on a significant budget. Underspending in this process can really get you what you pay for. So if you don't put a reputable team on a scope in order to get good coverage, you could be very sorry later. We see a lot of teams that are being asked to bid blind scopes. So basically you have a project that's not complete yet, we have no sense of code complete, but we're trying to schedule the audit in advance and try and compound the timeline. When this happens, you oftentimes overpay or you underscope the work. In both cases, that's actually very bad for the project. You have auditors that are hoping to maintain a fixed commitment on the scope, and it means you're not going to get the coverage that you're looking for. We also see teams that don't match the audit scope with the appropriate talent in the marketplace. And a lot of clients or a lot of teams don't fully understand what the talents are of some of these audit firms and pairing them appropriately. You wouldn't want an EVM team working on a Solana scope or vice versa. The last thing we see from folks is they oftentimes will use the same playbook for every project. So they pick the same team over and over for the same external audit, and they don't ever get any diversity of thought on the subject matter. And this gets you a polished report. It gets you something that you can give to your investors, but it doesn't really offer a ton of foundational security. The last one here is outsourced taupe. So launching bounties before internal review has happened. We see a lot of the contest space and the bounty space being incredibly competitive today. And as a result of that, what ends up happening is these bounty organizations are engaging folks really early in the process to try and get them to run a bounty. But this oftentimes happens before they've done any foundational work. It means that they've ever looked at the design, they've never done any linting, they've never done any of the fundamentals that they need to do before they get to that stage. So what happens is these teams often get wrecked in the bug bounty and they end up getting pushed out on the far part of the curve. So I think it's worth noting here that the external incentives here do not equal internal accountability. So oftentimes, you really need to take ownership of your security program. Even if you're not a security team, you need to understand these things. You need to understand the risks that you're taking day to day, because a lot of these teams, especially in the audit mindset, are not going to be there when you make these important decisions over the life cycle of your project. So, yes, for me, I want to go fast too, and I'm sure that you all do too. But fundamentally, defense in depth is our friend here. Defense in depth is actually what's going to allow us to move fast with confidence. And with these multiple layers of what I would otherwise call imperfect defense. So what we're really planning for is layers of defense in the security program that are faulty or that are imperfect. We are planning for failure at every stage, hoping that we can reduce the bug volume or the security risk as we get into the later stages where we're on the steeper part of the cost curve. And the goal here is to make sure that when we do have those bugs on the steep end of the cost curve, that we're not spending a ton of time on them. We really want to be spending a ton of time in the earlier process. So again, these layered gains can actually serve as an accelerant for your project and for your security program. So we've seen a number of teams that have been able to implement a layered approach, and what it does allow them to do is move forward with incredible confidence. And we'll go through a couple of examples of those. I'm sure many of you in this room are familiar with FireDancer. FireDancer is a new Solana client written in C. And the interesting part of this particular one is that the FireDancer being implemented in C introduces an underlying risk of memory safety. So we're very concerned about any sort of RCE risk here. So what the FireDancer team did is they implemented a sandbox for every single tile in the architecture. So basically, we've broken the architecture up into multiple tiles. We've restricted them to least privilege. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to guard against this RCE risk all the time. So as we move forward, as we add new tiles, as we evolve tiles, the FireDancer team can move forward with lots of confidence to know that some of this underlying risk is being muted all the time. And these particular engagements at an early start of the design, these are some of the best decisions that you can do in your projects. Basically, this is a design once and benefit forever situation. So this was a great example for us. Another example of this is Wormhole. So Wormhole did a similar thing, but it's in a slightly different part of the stack. So Wormhole is a cross-chain bridge, and what it does is it connects a number of different chains. And the main concern here is that as you connect all these chains together, if there's a security issue in one of those chains, you can run into a bunch of cross-chain contagion. So what they did is they implemented what they're calling the governor, which is effectively a rate limiter for notional value that if there's an underlying issue with one of the chains that we're connected to, it basically constrains the value that can leave that chain over time. So we're binding things to time, and what that allows us to do operationally day to day is it allows us time to respond when there is an issue. It allows us to cap a specific amount of risk over time. And again, this is just another example of build it once and benefit forever. These controls, when implemented correctly, provide durable value to these programs, and they're basically transparent when they're not in use, or when people aren't hitting those controls or are running through those controls. So I guess to run this full circle, I asked you all at the beginning to be boring. It feels very weird in a place that's based on innovation and taking risk. But fundamentally, this is not about being slow or unimaginative. This is about building with intention and with discipline. We want layers of security in place to ensure that we are not always living on the edge of collapse. I want you to ship and not die. And I want you to survive. I want you to outlast, and I want you to have the opportunity to iterate with your projects. And I want you to win. So I'll leave you with, I would ask you all, please be boring. Build systems that your users, that your partners, and that your future selves can trust. And that is how you ship and don't die. Thank you.